Thank you very much for coming. I'm Councillor Jason Farr. I'll be your MC this evening. It's very, very encouraging to see nearly full council chambers, and I know we'll have lots of viewers on Cable 14, and we thank Cable 14 for recording this production, and I'm sure we'll be airing it throughout the holiday season, so happy holidays, everybody. And thank you to Hammond and Joey Coleman for live streaming tonight's very important discussion. Important to note that this issue of two-way streets and complete streets is not a novel idea. The motion that we'll take a look at in just a moment here is a motion that simply brings a new tack to an old initiative, the Hamilton Transportation Master Plan. And we'll also speak tonight, I'm sure, about the future and maybe get a jump on the pedestrian mobility plan, which none of you can see. This is a draft I hold in my hands, but very soon it will be a public document, and it's long anticipated for we councillors, and I'm sure many of the people in this room. And we'll hear references of the TMP, the Transportation Master Plan, at points throughout this evening, and I'm sure too the Pedestrian Mobility Plan, or PMP. I think it all started, at least this motion began, and we sort of created some a lot of awareness and a lot of interest in September the 6th specifically, with this motion that was unanimously approved by Council on September 12th with ratification. It was moved by Councillor Brian McHattie of Ward 1, and I seconded this representing Ward 2. And here it is on the screen. Whereas there are over 100 one-way streets remaining in Hamilton, whereas increasingly there appears to be a strong convergence of public opinion in Hamilton in favor of converting one-way street conversion to benefit adjacent retail businesses, slow traffic, improve pedestrian movements, and generally increase livability in neighbourhoods, especially in downtown Hamilton. Whereas the 2008 City of Hamilton Transportation Master Plan included recommendations on a number of one-way street conversions which have not yet taken place. Whereas the one-way street conversions that have taken place on James, on John, on York, Wilson, Caroline, Hess, and Park are to be completed soon. Well, that was Park, but the rest have taken place, and they have been successful. Whereas city staff generally are supportive of one-way conversions, but require strong and unequivocal political support to move ahead with adequate financial resources. And whereas the majority of one-way streets exist in Wards 1 and 2. Therefore, be it resolved, and again, I reiterate, this was unanimously supported by Council, that a Ward 1, 2, and 3 one-way to two-way street study group be established to study and report on possible one-way street conversions in the downtown area, specifically Cannon Street and Queen Street, to inform the requisite environmental assessments, and B, that staff be directed to prepare a budget for the study for consideration during the 2013 budgetary process. And that budgetary process is on now, and we expect that that will wrap up sometime closing in on March, if not March, in the early stages of that month. Little program note, just as we get going here, we again are very fortunate to have a large group of folks here in the gallery, and of course those watching at home and on the live stream today. We'll have a brief intermission before we get to you and your questions and your comments and your concerns to our panel of experts and councillors. And I should also note that Councillor Bernie Morelli will be here very soon. He's at the Hamilton Police Services meeting as we speak. But at that intermission stage, you'll have an opportunity, if you like what you hear, and we hope you do, to fill out an information card that offers your contact information and breaks down where you may be interested in getting involved with this study group, as we see before us in the resolution supported by Council. Over recent times, and from well over a decade ago, we've heard from the experts on this subject. Richard Florida, the highly regarded U of T planner, lectured all over North America on this, and all over North America on those planning principles that bring urban sustainability. And he's been here in Hamilton on a few occasions. And he argues that, quote, the creative class, end quote, these skilled people with a wide range of fields, including finance and high tech and science and healthcare and law and the arts and others, careers and employment opportunities and professionals we want to see here in the inner city. They are, quote, the engine of the economy, These people are attracted to locations where they can enjoy diversity and a high quality of life, end quote. And that's from his 2002 book, The Rise of the Creative Class. And I know, as the representative for Ward 2 here in downtown Hamilton, I hear loudly from the creative class that two-way and/or complete streets corresponds with a high quality of life. The think tank, we can go back to 1977, and the think tank Partners for Livable Communities, they're around the world now, on urban prosperity, maintain that to succeed in the new economy, cities will need to be attractive as places to live and to work. Two-way and complete streets, they're attractive. And they're also safe, and they share, the think tank, the Partners for Livable Communities, they share that it is, quote, safe and convenient for travel by automobile, by foot, by bicycle, and transit for everyone in the community, regardless of age or ability, end quote. And in 2009, they even honored the AARP, that's the American Association of Retired Persons, for a study that showed nearly 50% of older adults say they cannot safely cross main roads close to their homes. The study discusses how the concept of, quote, complete streets, end quote, can improve the mobility of older adults. A public opinion telephone survey of 50-plus populations, an online survey of more than 1,000 transportation planners and engineers, and an inventory of 80 existing state complete street policies informed that study back in 2009. Little local history on tonight's topic, ladies and gentlemen. The Hamilton Society of Architects had a Hamilton downtown charrette June 1996. 2 days of ideas from 120 architects, urban designers, landscape architects, developers, local business people, planners, realtors, bankers, politicians, and a whole lot of local residents. And they walked the core for 2 days, and they came away with 10 recommendations. And of them, do away with one way on James Street and King Street. Our downtown plan mission statement from more than a decade ago includes this, quote, the downtown Hamilton of the future will be a vibrant focus of attraction where all of our diverse people can live, work, and play. The future downtown must be built on a human scale with streetscapes offering comfort, access, and safety for pedestrians, end quote. The vision is drawn directly from the Longo report taking place in Hamilton in 1998 that was entitled Downtown, a Marketplace for Ideas. And the report draws out 5 lessons in the end. And of the 5 in that summary, traffic patterns that favor pedestrians, support increased use of public transit, and calm automobile traffic to help downtown become a culture, shopping, and leisure destination for the region. Again, that's back in the 90s, 1998. After tonight, we expect to add greatly to what has become a growing list of support for these concepts before us, the concepts of two-way or complete streets. From the PTA at Dr. Davey, and I see some parents here tonight, to those of the NEN, and some of you are here awaiting the OMB verdict on your North End child and family-friendly streets proposal, to the Corktowners who asked and received a pedestrian-activated light on Augusta and John, to the Duranders, whose membership includes great people on this topic, well-informed people who have been preaching for years on this, like Nicholas Kevlahan. He says and hammers this fact home that we shouldn't fear this, and I think it's a very important point, and I hope Nick speaks tonight. I know he's here. He says, quote, we're not suggesting closing streets off or even reducing lanes, end quote. We have lots of support. The Chamber of Commerce, they've offered to be part of the consultation process with their membership. They've already started to work on the issue. With respect to residential street conversions, long ago presented through a council-supported transportation master plan, or the TMP as it'll be referred to many times tonight, Brad Clark, the councillor from Stony Creek, has already asked for the record, on the record, what's taking so long. He's eager to move on this aspect of the TMP, particularly as it relates to residential streets. And in the first quarter in 2013, as I mentioned, the long-awaited pedestrian mobility plan will come before this council and be debated, and I very much look forward to that. I've had a chance to look at it, and I know Councillor McHattie has as well, and it's, I think, very encouraging. So let's get started. Tonight's panel includes Councillor Bernie Morelli. He is currently busy with the Hamilton Police Services Board meeting. He'll be here imminently. Councillor Brian McHattie will speak in a bit. He's going to introduce the concept of a stakeholder study group and share his presentation on the processes past and present, sharing his perspective, and in some cases, I'm sure, frustrations. Steve Malloy is here. Steve, if you just want to raise your hand. Steve's the project manager with the Transportation Master Plan. Steve will break down the TMP and explain how the environmental assessment process relates to it. And it's an important process, and one we're going to do with hopefully a lot of you as well. We'll have a public EA as well. Sharon Mackinnon is here. There's Sharon over there. She's a public health nurse with the City of Hamilton, and she's here to explain the public health benefits of complete streets. That will be engaging, and she'll be up shortly. And Peter Topalovic is also here. Many of you know Peter. Peter's the project manager with Transportation Demand Management, and he's going to talk about balanced transportation. But we're going to start with a well-known urban prosperity advocate, the developer of Raise the Hammer, a popular local media website that sees several thousand hits per day, focusing on our city's potential, dedicated to making Hamilton a more vibrant, livable, and attractive place to live and work. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan McGreal.
Thanks, Councillor Farr. I feel a little intimidated by that introduction. Okay, can everyone hear me? Wonderful. Okay, so first of all, oops, that's not right. Sorry, technical difficulties here. So first of all, before we talk about complete streets, let's talk about traffic. What is traffic? Normally when you hear about traffic in the news or in discussion, traffic means people in cars. But in fact, traffic just means people going from somewhere to somewhere else. People on foot, people on bicycles, people on skateboards, people on transit, and people in cars as well. But the important thing about traffic is that we have to understand that traffic is people going from somewhere to somewhere else. And our streets shouldn't require that people all use the same mode no matter where they're going. So a complete street is a street that lets people travel in a variety of different ways. On foot, on bicycle, in transit, in a car, on a skateboard, all these different things. It makes space for everybody in every mode, not just for cars. And it brings people into contact safely. This is, one of the crucial aspects. Of course, on a street that is dominated by cars, the last thing you want is for people coming into contact. But on a complete street, that's different. It's actually a positive thing. And so a complete street finds a way to balance the competing needs of different modes so that there's room for everybody. So some characteristics of a complete street: wide sidewalks with trees. Trees are really important. Lots of easy pedestrian crossings, places where you can get from one side to the other without having to walk a half a kilometer out of your way. Fewer and narrower driving lanes. Dedicated bike lanes, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And most importantly, places for people to meet up. Again, a complete street is a street that encourages people to come into contact in safe and productive ways. And there's a lot of social and, in fact, economic benefits to that. So this is just a picture of a before and after. On the top there, you had obviously a car-dominated street. It's like 4 or 5 lanes of traffic, narrow little ribbons of sidewalk, very intimidating, very car-centric. On the bottom now, you have a much different characterization. You have wider sidewalks. You have shade. You've got dedicated separate bike lanes. You've got a nice, well-marked pedestrian crossing. There's still room for cars, but they no longer dominate the street. Again, you've got sidewalks, bike lanes. This is a close-up here. You've got 2 lanes of car traffic. You've got 2 lanes of bicycle traffic. You've got a sidewalk that's wide enough for 5 people to walk abreast. I know on too many of Hamilton's sidewalks, particularly around the downtown, my 10-year-old son and I actually can't walk side by side. We sort of have to do this shuffle. And that's not conducive to getting out and walking. So again, we have another example here. The trees are important. Certainly in the summer, it provides a cooling and shading effect. Another thing it does is psychologically, it tells drivers to slow down. When the street, is kind of shaped like an arch, it almost feels like you're inside a defined space. And all the psychological message to drivers, opposing traffic, lots of crossings, is that there are things they need to watch out for and that they should slow down and be more careful. And that, in fact, translates into a lot of real benefits, which I'll talk about. So this is actually a photograph of a square in the south of France. I was there and I was immediately struck by the similarity to Gore Park, except that this one was full of people. And the main reason is that it's not surrounded by highways on both sides. People can walk to it, they can enjoy it. There are streets that are, buildings that have cafes that open up. There are places to sit, places to socialize. There's a market that's outdoors here every Wednesday afternoon, and the place is full of people. So what complete streets do, first of all, they reduce speeding automobiles. In Hamilton, we have lots of streets that are really designed to facilitate high-speed traffic. Not just cars going the speed limit, but cars exceeding the speed limit. And in fact, cars going, even when they're at the speed limit, 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers an hour is far too high for a street in a built-up urbanized area. Complete streets encourage people to walk. The safer it is to walk, the friendlier it is to walk, the more attractive it is to walk, people will walk more. Similarly with cycling. City after city around the world, no matter what the climate is like, no matter what the topology is like, if you create an environment that is conducive to cycling with dedicated bike lanes that actually connect to each other, then more people ride bicycles and cycling increases and increases. And then finally, again, it encourages meetings and chance encounters, which all the research that's been done into economic development over the past 30 or 40 years, it's increasingly focused on the role of chance encounters in actually facilitating innovation, facilitating economic growth. Cities that bring people into contact in a very organic way grow faster than cities that don't. So some more benefits of complete streets. They're safer for all users, including drivers. This is one of the interesting things that came out of the research that I've been doing is that, when you put in dedicated bike lanes, when you widen sidewalks, when you plant trees, when you convert to two-way, the number of accidents for cyclists and pedestrians goes down, but the number of accidents for drivers goes down as well. On Jarvis Street in Toronto, which bike lanes were put in, and then 2 years later, the bike lanes were very unceremoniously taken out. But in that time, the number of cyclists on the street tripled, and the number of accidents dropped by 23%. That's in accidents involving all vehicles, including cars. Again, you have increased neighborhood interaction. You have, so socially it becomes better. You have more people out on the street. You have violence goes down. People feel more comfortable to walk around their own communities. Local businesses definitely benefit. The more people you have walking around, the more business those places are going to make. And you have just generally an improved quality of life for everyone who lives and works around there. Now, I've mentioned speed and speeding vehicles. The engineers will certainly correct me if I'm wrong in this, but the energy of a vehicle is related to the square of its speed. So if you take a vehicle that's going a certain speed and double it, you've actually quadrupled that vehicle's destructive capacity. You've quadrupled the stopping distance. And that is borne out in the statistics. At 32 kilometers an hour, which is roughly the speed that North End neighbors want to set as a speed limit for that community, the risk of a pedestrian being killed in a collision with a car is 5%. At 48 kilometers an hour, that risk jumps to 45%. And at 64 kilometers an hour, which is the front of the green wave on Main Street, that jumps to 85%. So just bringing the speed of cars down dramatically reduces the risk of being killed if you get hit. And at the same time, it reduces the risk of getting hit in the first place, because as the stopping distance shrinks, drivers have more of an opportunity to stop and get out of the way so that the collision doesn't happen in the first place. So I want to talk just a little bit specifically about one-way to two-way conversion, because it's so important for Hamilton right now. Our one-way streets were designed as such and implemented in 1956 by an American traffic engineer named Wilbur Smith, who basically traveled to cities all over North America that had been built before cars and suddenly had to accommodate cars. And he came up with this idea that if you have paired one-way thoroughfares, you can funnel huge volumes of traffic through the city very quickly. Now, in fairness to him, he was remarkably successful at achieving this. Unfortunately, the price that we've had to pay in vitality and quality of life in other areas has been enormous. A study that was conducted using Hamilton data and published in 2000 in a peer-reviewed public health journal found that children on a one-way street are 2.5 more times likely to be to be injured than on a two-way street. So the data really is there. It supports the fact that one-way streets are more dangerous than two-way streets. You have faster vehicle speeds. You have fewer impediments. As a driver, you get into your one-way street, it feels like a highway, and you just go. Whereas on a two-way street, you're more alert. So there's lots of issues around speed and driver inattention. People behave differently on one-way streets than on two-way streets. Two-way streets are certainly better for local street retail. We've seen this in city after city that's taken those one-way streets that they converted around the same time we did. They've converted them back to two-way, and they've immediately seen large increases in business. On James Street North and John Street North, they were converted to two-way in 2002, and so I contacted the the Downtown Business Improvement Area, and they surveyed their members after the conversion, and what the businesses said was that business had gone up, sales were up, some places had hired more people. They very generally saw a benefit to it. One of the benefits, quite simply, is that motorists can approach from either direction. So it's not just, again, it's not just a benefit for people who aren't driving, but people who are driving actually are safer on two-way streets and have more flexibility in how to get where they're going. This is a quote from a business owner. This is May 1957 on King Street. 7 months after the streets were converted to one-way, a group of business owners descended on the Public Works Committee, and he said, he told them, "Our windows are no good nowadays. People have no time to stop and look. Nobody comes from the west end of the city anymore. We would like to see King Street two-way once more." That was May 1957. This is May 2012. Another business owner also on King Street. He said, "Tried telling someone to find our store from the west end. It's a complex set of directions, wastes both time and gas, creates more travel time, and really thwarts our accessibility to customers. For a retailer, making it hard for a customer is never a good thing." So again, in well over 50 years now, businesses have been telling us the same thing. Two-way also supports LRT. Hamilton, for a number of years now, has been building plans to build an east-west LRT line running from McMaster through the downtown out to the East End. And the Metrolinx, which is the provincial organization, they did a benefits case analysis, and they actually found that the LRT will be more successful if we convert Main and King to two-way. Earlier this year, McMaster Institute of Logistics and Transportation did their own study for Hamilton, and they came to the same conclusion. They said that LRT will be more successful at not only at attracting riders, but also at attracting new private investment if we convert those streets to two-way. So this idea that, well, we can't touch those streets because of LRT, and we're not going to get LRT for 10 years, it's just an excuse not to make any differences. And finally, the one argument we keep hearing about two-way streets is that it'll somehow create gridlock, right? And that's just, it's not the case. It hasn't been the case in any places that have done it. One of the remarkable things that happens when you convert a street to two-way is that some of the traffic simply disappears. A lot of the traffic that is on our streets in Hamilton, it's called induced demand. It's cars that are driving only because it is so easy to drive everywhere. But when you make it easier to walk and easier to cycle, you actually draw some people out of their cars and onto bikes or onto the foot. And that actually reduces the amount of car traffic. So this is, you don't have to read the whole thing, but this is just a list of some cities in North America that have converted to two-way in the past few years. We're not alone. Anyhow, that was very brief. But so Hamilton today, as I've mentioned, our streets cater overwhelmingly to cars. We've got multiple one-way driving lanes, high vehicle speeds, very few bike lanes, narrow sidewalks, and very few pedestrian crossings. So we're looking tonight at making, as a first move, looking seriously at Queen Street and Cannon Street. Now this is a photograph of, this is looking south on Queen from Herkimer. As you can see, at the bottom of the escarpment, it's actually a two-way street. It's got 2 lanes in each direction. This was taken in the middle of the afternoon on Friday. Not a lot of gridlock that we have to worry about. This is the exact same street looking north from Herkimer. It switches to a one-way street southbound. So if you're coming down the Garth Street access and want to, say, drive downtown, you can't. You suddenly at Herkimer either have to turn down Herkimer and go down Hess or some other way, or you have to race down Stanley and try not to catch air off the speed bumps that they installed there to stop people from racing down Stanley. Queen Street is kind of a no-brainer, to be honest with you. We've got lots and lots of room. Again, this was taken at the same time. It was about 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. There's one pedestrian crossing, and there's no pedestrian crossing there, but people are going to cross when they have to cross, and there's no traffic. This is a view east on Cannon Street from James. This was taken again in the middle of the afternoon. So thank goodness we have these massive multi-lane one-way streets, because otherwise, where would all the cars go? The thing is, we know what to do. We've been told over and over and over again. This was a visualization that was done for Main Street West earlier this year by Factory, which is a graphic design company in Southwest Hamilton. You've got separated bike lanes, you've got trees, you've got curbside parking, you've got two-way traffic, you've got pedestrian-friendly sidewalks. This is not really hard stuff to do. We just need the political will to make it happen. So I'm not going to read through this, but you know, as Councillor Farr mentioned, we've been talking about this for a long time, since 1992, 1996, the Downtown Ideas Charrette, 2001 was putting people first, 2005 we had the GRID's growth strategy, which was the city's long-term growth planning. 2007, you know, we've been studying this and studying this and studying this for many, many years now, well into the decades. And it's time that we take all of the things we've learned from all the studying we've done and put it into practice. This is just a quick note. In 2002, the city did a study on traffic, automobile traffic in Durand neighborhood, and they found that 40% of vehicles were exceeding the speed limit on minor arterials. 200 plus vehicles a day were traveling at greater than 65 kilometers an hour. Again, this is through urban residential neighborhoods. And they concluded that the Durand streets have way too much lane capacity. This is, again, I'm not going to read it, a list of some of the experts, engineers, planners who have come to Hamilton in the past few years and told us what we've been telling ourselves as well. We're getting it from the World Health Organization. The Ontario coroner recently did a study and concluded that we need to focus on building complete streets so that pedestrians can cross the street safely without being killed. In terms of public health, I know Sharon Mackinnon is going to talk a lot more about this. This was a study that was just done in Toronto, and what they found was that people living in streets that have low walkability are a lot more likely to get diabetes than people who live in more walkable streets, and that's after controlling for income. Again, quality of life. You know, the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, which hasn't come out with a position on two-way conversion yet, but they did a study earlier this year on walkability and economic development. And they concluded walkable environments should be viewed as economic infrastructure that attract employment and should be invested in accordingly. The International Village BIA just earlier this month came out formally in support of two-way conversion. They said that there's no greater obstacle to the success of their businesses, and there's no single issue that could be fixed more easily than converting Main and King and Ken into two-way. Finally, this is a list of the streets that were supposed to be converted as part of our transportation master plan. A lot of them are still outstanding. And so, you know, I've been talking over and over about, you know, we've been hearing this and hearing this. We've got experts telling us, we've done studies. So why has it not happened yet? We've got policy, we've got the evidence, we've got lots of expert advice. There's something, and then we're successful, right? So what's that missing ingredient? And of course, what's missing up to this point has been a coordinated, concerted effort of engaged citizens. We need to make it as easy as possible for our elected leaders to do the right thing and to feel like they're being supported. Some of the obstacles that we're encountering, there's a general resistance to change. People are afraid of making changes. They're afraid if we try it, it'll fail. People are afraid to put their neck out. You know, ideology gets in the way, partisanship gets in the way. So we have to find ways to overcome these. And, you know, the way we do that is by engaging respectfully, by challenging the ideologies with real evidence from other cities and from Hamilton, by building a broad coalition of support, which I hope this evening is going to help with, and reducing the risk for politicians. You know, we have some very courageous politicians in the room who already support this. We need to get enough other politicians on board that, that we can make this happen. You know, and then we work towards a majority that gets these things accomplished. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. And Ryan McGreal will be around for our Q&A, which is the second half of our public meeting tonight. Coming up next now to the main podium is Sharon Mackinnon. She is a public health nurse with the City of Hamilton, here to explain the public health benefits of complete streets. And as Sharon makes her way up, we'll ask that everybody remember that during the intermission, you fill out your cards if you do want to get involved in our public EA process. They'll be available on that table just as you go out the door. The intermission will be brief, but you can fill them out during the second half Also, I'd like to welcome our Director of Transit, Don Hall, who's in the crowd. We very much appreciate Don's presence tonight. He's here to listen. And Larissa Skripniak is also here from Public Works. Hi, Larissa. Thank you very much for being here. And I see a lot of folks from both Ward 1, 2, and I think a few 3 neighborhood associations as well. So, our public health nurse now on the public health benefits of complete streets. Was there an order issue here? Did Stephen? Okay, you know what? You may take a reprieve, Sharon, and we'll let our guys, we'll let Steve and Peter, I understand you're presenting together? No? Okay, Steve, you go up on your own now. Steve Malloy, to provide some context. I was just giving you 3 minutes to do an introduction.
I know, my apologies, but I think it would be helpful if there's...
Provide context, yes, sure, go ahead.
So, and I don't have a big fancy presentation, my apologies for that. I'm a pretty dry speaker too, so I really appreciate you guys having the time to come out to these meetings. And that's one of the difficulties that we have is that the public engagement aspect of it, and thank you, Ryan, for highlighting that, because that's a very important part that we need to improve on. So just a little background, myself, Steve Malloy with Public Works. I'm, my title role is Transportation Master Plan Implementation Manager, I guess. So I'm project manager, and it's a fancy title, but really what it is monitoring what the Transportation Master Plan has done, and that's from the citywide Transportation Master Plan. So we have a bunch of monitoring indicators and that type of thing that goes along with it to see how well we're doing in our last Transportation Master Plan, which was started in 2005, then Council approved it in 2007. Well, a lot has changed since then, and we're having these changing dynamics, and Complete Streets was something that was kind of in its infancy at that time. And those elements are in the 2007 Transportation Master Plan, but they aren't really stated that clearly, and we've kind of done some things in that direction. So really this is an opportunity in 2013, hopefully we get our capital budget approved for that, to do an update and to incorporate the concept of Complete Streets and two-way conversions from a holistic perspective from the city to see how well the transportation network will operate for all modes of transportation, because that's really what Complete Streets is about, is to accommodate a balanced transportation system that accommodates all modes of travel. And really that has a lot of significant environmental benefits and health benefits, and that's why that's kind of the context related to that. And also the concept of travel demand management is giving people modal choice. So then everyone's not limited to being into an automobile. They can take transit, they can take rapid transit, they can take GO train, they can walk, or they can bike. So all these type of things go into the Transportation Master Plan from a citywide perspective. And also we have to address our growth changes, because we've identified many years ago that we'd be growing a lot faster than we actually are. So some of our assumptions in that Transportation Master Plan actually are probably a little bit more conservative than what they need to be. So we need to update those numbers and really see how the transportation system is going to operate in the next 20 years based on this update. So to get to that point, we have this process called the environmental assessment process. And it's somewhat complicated, but I'll simplify it as best as possible. Really, the environmental assessment process is intended to provide a screening criteria to look at all the things that we're considering, all the different alternatives, and have some measurable indicators of what brings the best balanced solution to our issues. So that's probably in a nutshell the most simple way I can explain it. I am very happy to go into more detail on a one-on-one basis, probably a little bit more easier to do it that way. But again, as part of that process, we have our compulsory public meetings that they tell us to do, but really what we find is that's not good enough, and we need to do a little bit better job of doing that public engagement and engaging people into a conversation rather than a dull meeting with panels that people don't really care about, they're not really engaged about. So what I really want to learn from everybody in this room is how to best engage you. So what are the best methods we could use, whether it's public meetings or is it online stuff, is it more focus groups, or I don't know what the solution is, but I want to hear from everybody here what the best way to engage yourselves and other people in the city so we can have an intelligent conversation about all the issues to come up with something that really gives us the best transportation system citywide. So I think that's my little spiel there.
Okay, that was the project manager with the Transportation Master Plan, Steve Malloy. Next up, it's Peter Topalovic. Peter is the project manager with the Transportation Demand Management Office, He's going to talk about balanced transportation. Peter?
Yes, and I think we were, someone said, congratulations on your presentation and good luck. And I said, well, we're really giving extended introductions. So, that's right. But I have a few slides just to provide some connection between what Steve said and what the job that I do. And we all know there's a Hamilton official plan, and that guides all land use planning for the city. And then that really leads into the Transportation Master Plan, which really breaks down this official plan into what we're going to do for transportation and the transportation sector. And that's really what Steve oversees. And of course, it has guiding principles and implementation plans. And then there's sustainable mobility and transportation demand management. And these are sort of some of the implementation strategies. I think one important part coming out of the TMP and its planning since 2007 is that we've hired a person to implement part of that, which is the TDM project manager and me. So I'm a little biased, but I think that was a good step. And some people, actually, Steve and I like to say that if Steve is the bread, then TDM and myself is the butter. So that's another way to look at it. But what is transportation demand management? And beyond this slide, how many people have heard of the term TDM before, just as a poll? So you guys, a fair few of you are engaged and you heard this. It's really just a buzzword, but it breaks down to be something really simple. And it's incentives, strategies, and policies to reduce travel demand. And when I say travel demand, we really want to decrease the use of single occupant vehicles. That is, vehicles that have only one person in them, or vehicles that are not being fully utilized. And we ask very basic questions. Whether, so when we're talking about a trip, do we need to take the trip at all? Can we telecommute, work from home, trip chain, so do 3 or 4 trips in one trip so that you don't have to do those all as separate trips? We ask why, what is the purpose? So understanding how people are getting to where they're going and why they're going there. Well, we ask when. Can we shift people's trips? So rather than everyone leaving at 8 o'clock, people will leave at different times. And then, of course, we ask things that I think we're more familiar with. Where? So are we looking at the street level, the citywide level, and how are we going to form our plans based on what we're focusing on? And then, of course, how, which is the most salient of TDM. There's many modes, and we talk about the combination of these modes. So really, I think Complete Streets really focuses on the where and how. It's part of that part of TDM. But TDM has really evolved, I think, into sort of a more multimodal, more connected realm. My fancy graphics is sustainable mobility. And this really, the sustainable mobility wheel, sort of takes into account all the different aspects of TDM, the Transportation Master Plan, and then the things we're talking about tonight, which is Complete Streets. For instance, and I'll start with schools, workplace, and neighborhoods. We do a lot of programs to help them manage their travel demand. The Smart Commute program, I think many of you are probably hopefully familiar with Smart Commute. That's an employee program that helps employees at different workplaces travel more sustainably to work. We have a health and environmental connection, especially with obesity and air quality, and I know this is really the build-up to Sharon's presentation on health and complete streets. But really, I think what's most important is that it takes a network approach or a systems approach. And I think it's really important to think about that everyone, no matter what trip they're taking, is a pedestrian first. I know you've probably heard this before, because even if you're a driver, at some point your trip includes a walk. And really trying to understand how these modes integrate together. So if you're taking a bus trip, you're also walking, and you might be on your bike, and then you might take your bike on the bus. And so TDM really tries to understand how these things all integrate. And that really, when we talk about modal integration, we're also talking about the policies to I would say, incentivize that modal integration and incentivize the use of these different modes. I think Complete Streets is really a key component of that, because if we're going to ask people to take transit or walk or cycle, we have to make sure that the streets in the city will accommodate that use. And that's really where achieving the balance comes into play, because our streets, and some streets better than others, and in various different cities in North America, some streets achieve that balance better than others. And I think it's really a street-per-street analysis in terms of what should that street be doing and how should that street be getting people around town. And so I think that's really what TDM can offer, is to understand how we analyze the street, so that if this street is has more pedestrians or is going to accommodate pedestrians? Are we doing wider sidewalks? Are we looking at bike lanes? Are we looking at a two-way street versus a one-way street? All these different things I mentioned are part of our toolkit for complete streets and integrating TDM and then modal integration as well. So I think that's, I think I've mentioned connectivity between modes, but also that the goods movement aspect of that. So again, there's that balance of not just car drivers and trucks, but also pedestrians, cyclists, and walkers. And I think that's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I think it's sometimes hard for staff to be able to engage so many stakeholders at once. So I think this is a great opportunity for us, and thanks to the councillors and Keenan and Ryan as well. Thank you.
That's Peter Topalovic. He's the project manager with Transportation Demand Management, and we thank him very much for his attendance. I know it's not easy to engage a large group at once. Sometimes I've been with Steve where it's a small group and it's maybe even more difficult. It depends. But we do appreciate your time here. In just a moment, Sharon Mackinnon is going to join us, the public health nurse. Long anticipated presentation from Sharon. We do appreciate her attendance too, but I'll remind all our viewers on Cable 14 that you're watching a public meeting tonight from council chambers at City Hall. Our focus is two-way and complete streets. In just a few moments, we're going to hear from Ward 2 Councillor Brian McHattie, who moved a mid-September motion on this subject on getting the public engaged in the form of a study group. That motion supported unanimously by council, and we'll have much to discuss on that and hear from Brian in just a few moments. But first now, it is our public health nurse, Sharon Mackinnon. Sharon.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm going to be addressing some of the health issues related to complete streets. So the built environment, which basically is everything that's man-made, from our streets and our wires and our subways and our transportation systems, and basically the way that our built environment is created affects our health. It can affect physical activity, whether or not we have the opportunity to engage in physical activity, if there's a sidewalk to walk on. It affects the environment, such as air quality and water quality. And it's already been mentioned by Ryan, the issue around safety. How our built environment is made can also affect our road safety. And also around health equity. So how our built environment is made can influence our health equity. You may have heard this term, physical activity, being engineered out of our lives. You've probably seen this fitness piece where they've got the stairs leading up to the fitness center, and that's just a classic example of how we really don't do a lot of physical activity. It's almost easier not to do it today. I don't have on here is all the time that children and adults are spending in front of screens, which is very sedentary and doesn't involve a whole lot of physical activity. Physical activity plays an important role in the health and well-being of our lives. It's good for our health. It helps with healthy growth and development. It prevents chronic diseases like cancer and type 2 diabetes, heart disease, overweight and obesity, and osteoporosis. Physical activity can make us stronger, it gives us energy, it can decrease stress, and it can prolong our independence as we grow older. The Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines recommends for adults, anybody 18 and over, to accumulate 150 minutes of physical activity per week. And that can be accumulated in about 10 minutes, bouts of 10 minutes or more. And it's fairly disturbing to note that only about 15% of Canadian adults get that 150 minutes of physical activity per week. When we look at our children and youth, it's recommended that they get 60 minutes of physical activity a day. And when we look at our statistics across the country, only 7% of children and youth meet those Canadian guidelines. So it's fairly concerning. When we look at some of the information that's come out of our Healthy Active Kids Canadian report card, they put a report card out every year, and 46% of Canadian kids get 3 hours or less of active play per week, and that includes weekends. 63% of Canadian kids' free time after school and on weekends is spent in sedentary activities. And 35% of kids 10 to 16 use active transportation getting to and from school. If we break that down, 33% walking and 2% biking. And if you compare that to a few decades ago, the decrease is rather dramatic. When we look at our obesity and overweight, for data here in Hamilton for 2007, this is based on self-reported data for individuals 18 and over, 59.8% of Hamiltonians are either overweight or obese. That's in comparison to about 50% at the province, which is a statistically significant difference. When we look at travel, and Ryan alluded to this in his slide where he was talking about traffic, everybody travels, whether it's getting to school, work, play, running errands. Everybody travels, and they travel in different ways. They can walk, they can cycle, they can use their wheelchair. It may be a truck for goods movement. It may be just a vehicle, a car, to get to and from. How people travel provides a really great opportunity for interventions that can impact not only individual health, but also community health and the environment. So it's sort of looking at that health at a population level. Creating opportunities for cycling and walking can potentially have a positive impact on health conditions such as obesity, and it can also have a positive impact on our environment. If there's more people out walking and cycling and taking transit, it means there's less people in cars, which could decrease emissions, which is going to be a good thing for all of us. Ryan also talked about the safety issues related to traffic and the injury rates and how that is impacted on the different speeds, so I won't go into that. In addition, walking and cycling out on the streets can lead for more opportunities for social interaction and community cohesion, and this in turn has shown to have a positive impact on mental health. When we look at improvements on the street, they can lead to increased pedestrian traffic, which in turn can lead to a good things for the economic pieces in a neighborhood. So when we look at complete streets, this could be a great opportunity for everyone. Ryan has talked about what complete streets are, and he had some great visuals up there. I just want to reiterate the benefits of complete streets. They improve the safety. We talked about that. It encourages cycling and walking. That's a great thing for health. Complete streets can lower transportation costs for families, and that can be a good thing. Complete streets can foster strong communities by having the social interaction on the street. And also, complete streets are environmentally friendly. Some studies have shown that cyclist injuries and collisions with automobiles can be reduced by up to 50% by the creation of marked on-road bike lanes. The construction of a raised median, curbs, and sidewalks has been demonstrated to reduce the amount of time during which pedestrians are exposed to traffic, and therefore risk of collisions, by 28%. Streets that are designed for pedestrian safety often produce safety for drivers as well, and Ryan alluded to this as well. So you probably recognize this as a before and after shot of York Boulevard. The picture on the right is a good example of a complete street here in Hamilton, one that is designed for all users, vehicles, transit, walkers, cyclists of all ages and abilities. There's an opportunity to create and modify the built environment so that it supports healthy communities. A variety of stakeholders working together will be necessary for this to happen, including citizens, community groups, multidisciplinary professionals, municipal, provincial, and federal governments, NGOs, and other partners. Together, we can work towards streets that provide safe, convenient, efficient, and accessible use by all people of all ages and abilities. Thank you very much.
City staffer from Public Health, Sharon Mackinnon, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Ward 3 Councillor Bernie Morelli to come down and maybe take Judy's seat or Brad's seat, whichever one you wish. And while he's making his way down, we appreciate he's been in attendance for some time since his Hamilton Police Services meeting, ladies and gentlemen. I want to also recognize a few people that are here tonight in the gallery, and their attendance is most important to us too. I can see Daryl Benders here. He works on our bike lanes with the City of Hamilton. Nice to have Daryl. David Premi in the gallery as well, the award-winning local architect who just had a plug, I think, on one of the slides we just saw. And he's also the chair of the Hamilton Arts Council. Among other things he's been very busy at as a Ward 1 resident who's active with his business in downtown. Keenan Loomis is here from MIP. Hi, Keenan. Thank you very much for coming and helping us organize this meeting as a representative of Innovation Factory. And I also see the CEO or COO or both, David Adames. Very important that you're here. Very significant to have you in attendance in the gallery, representing, of course, the Chamber of Commerce. And I know you continue to work on the subject before us tonight, so it's key to have you in attendance. And I think it's also key that we have so many representatives from the many neighborhood associations in both Wards 1, 2, and 3. And with that, here to speak on behalf of his residents from Ward 3, a man who's busy in his ward right now with more conversions than the Calgary Stampeders were converting at the 100th Grey Cup, Councillor Bernie Morelli.
Thank you, Jay, and I'll be very brief. And certainly, first of all, let me congratulate you and Brian in working on this very critical topic, and certainly for all those that are here tonight to present. It's certainly a continuous learning experience for me. You know, I think that, and I apologize, I wasn't here earlier tonight due to, you can appreciate the fact that we're trying to put together a police budget that we can sell, and quite frankly, the challenges in that area are substantial as well. But nevertheless, I mean, for me, it's a learning experience. This topic, it's a very, we're living in very changing times, and it's very a dynamic topic, and I think that we need to recognize that as our environments change, certainly being here and having lived all my life in this community for some period of time now, I've seen the change. You know, when I was employed as a senior executive at DeFasco with 13,000 people, and Stelco with 18,000 people at one point in the north end, just that alone, you know, in the way traffic moved and how people thought it during those times is certainly something I'm aware of, and I'm also aware of the fact that today we have gained some very critical experience just in the topic of physical activity in itself, and the focus that we have on not just safety, but the fact that people's physical conditions have changed, and how we need to adapt to present times is certainly something that's right before me, and certainly very appreciated by me. And certainly, you know, I think the key term that I heard tonight for me was the fact that what are the things that need to be done, and I think engagement of the citizenship to see the benefits of these changes that we're anticipating, not only for now, but moving forward. So I think we're in the right mode, and we're beginning at the right point, and we just need to continue to pursue this. I have been working. I think this is a part of a huge picture. I work with the Bicycling Group, and to date, I've been able to work closely with them and do everything they've asked me to do. I think the most recent, Daryl Bender's here tonight, the most recent change was certainly on Victoria North. I can tell you that I'm working, we have worked on obviously the Wilson Street conversions as the extension that we're looking currently with EAs. We're doing Wentworth South, we're doing Sanford South, we're looking at Birch and Sherman and Victoria North as well. A lot of my focus too incorporates the fact that we've got to find ways to allow people to move in this community with their bikes as well as their cars, as well as be able to walk. And I think that the concept of complete streets makes full sense to me. And I won't even get into the concept of LRT where that fits. But certainly I think transportation is, for me, the real critical factor moving forward for this whole province, quite frankly. And I see ourselves as a region that will develop, and will develop according to how quickly we adapt with a good transportation model. And so, you know, the other piece that is very much in the forefront for me is certainly the continuing work of Barton Street and how, you know, we have two-way down there, but we need to, and so I'm working closely with Glenn Norton as we have a $100,000 program to look at some changes that, potential changes there, as well as I expect to be announcing very shortly that we'll do a charrette, I hope, with seeking to engage community and citizenship to see what we can do to turn that into what I've always envisioned. I look back some 20 years now when I took Bill Powell down there for the first time and envisioned the street of the universe. And in many ways, it's taking that form, but it needs to be pushed a little bit further. And certainly, I've always seen a terrific hook between James Street, the Harbourfront, and Barton Street. And certainly, while we've been looking at that and working towards that, obviously Ottawa Street has completed the loop. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight to be able to express some of the things that we're doing, and I want to just salute you and everyone that's engaged in this process of trying to do the right thing for now and for those times moving forward, and I'm pleased to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that $100,000 study, Bernie, is that from Kineski's to Springies or Friscolantes to Springies?
Actually,
I might be part of that.
Friscolantes.
All right, thank you. That'll be great. We're looking forward to that, and that's a significant first step, and certainly I think all the pieces are in place. Next up, it's Councillor Brian McHattie. He's going to introduce the concept of stakeholder study groups and share his presentation on the process, past and present, and also his perspectives that start with this slide. I'll let him read it out, but I don't know if it's a direct quote, but we'll find out in a second. Ward 1 Councillor Brian McHattie, ladies and gentlemen.
Great. Thanks very much, Councillor Farr. It's great to be here tonight with everybody. Thanks a lot for coming. It's a great turnout this evening. We organize these meetings, and you're never entirely sure how many folks are going to turn up, but this is a wonderful turnout this evening as well. And it's great to follow all the speakers earlier in this evening. A bit of perhaps a funny opening slide here for my presentation, but I think it's when we listen to Ryan's presentation in particular, he went through a lot of the studies that have been done previously, and obviously a lot of them have been done over the years. Early comments by that retailer back in 1952 who questioned the one-way streets at that point in time, and we've been through an awful lot of studies since that time. And I think we really need to look at whether we're getting anywhere, whether it's time for a substantive change in how we approach transportation planning in Hamilton. I'm going to try and talk about that tonight and make a few suggestions if I can. So just looking at the recent studies, you heard the term, Councillor Farr referred to it a couple times, the TMPs, the Transportation Management Plans. And I've been through TMPs in each of the Ward 1 neighborhoods, Ainslie-Wood, Westdale in 2004, I think it was, and then followed by Kirkendall a couple of years later. And we're just going through the Strathcona neighborhood plan right now. And then the citywide plan, which I guess I had 2005 up there, was 2007, was it? 2007 was finalized, and we're just preparing to redo the citywide plan. And in the citywide plan, we set targets for how we'd like to see the modal split change. And what I mean by modal split is looking at how many folks are riding their bikes, how many folks are taking the bus, how many folks are walking, versus how many folks are taking their car. And in that 2005-2007 citywide plan, there were targets placed there. And to this point, anyways, in terms of the data we have so far, it looks like there's been no real change in the modal split throughout the city. And I should put a asterisk beside that comment in the sense that we're waiting for more results. The Transportation for Tomorrow survey, which gives us that information, is set to report next year. So we're hoping it's going to change. We're hoping there's been some impact. But again, back to that point, if we're doing all these studies and we're taking a particular approach to transportation planning in the city of Hamilton, we're really not seeing the changes. So time for a change. So public participation, I bet you almost everybody in this room has been part of some form of public participation. You're here tonight in the city of Hamilton. And we've got, I think, a pretty interesting record. I started getting involved in this kind of work in 1986 with the Hamilton Harbor Remedial Action Plan. And we had, I think it was 43 stakeholders on the Stakeholders Committee to develop plans to clean up the bay. And as you know, we're just moving ahead on Randall Reef. We just got the funding for Randall Reef this month. So we're still working on cleaning up the bay, but we've made substantive changes. The Vision 2020 process was the largest public participation process in Hamilton, starting in 1990, wrapping up in around 93, with thousands of Hamiltonians offering thoughts on what they want to see happen in the city, and some of that was about transportation. On a regular basis, we have open houses on a variety of plans in the city and public information centers, various public meetings. Lately, we've got into this community liaison committee language, and you're probably hearing a lot of buzzwords tonight, but that's guided particular developments in Ward 1, the Good Shepherd Centre being one of the large ones. We're doing neighborhood planning right now through a number of neighborhoods that were identified in the Code Red work in the Hamilton Spectator, McQueston neighborhood and Beasley and others. Working in a different style. We regularly interact with the neighborhood associations, the 3 in my area, the 6 in Ward 2, I believe, Councillor Farr, and a whole series in Ward 3 as well and across the city. And lately, for me, and I think I'm going to jump off on this point tonight when we're talking about transportation planning, is I had the opportunity to look at this concept of participatory budgeting with the area rating funding that each of Wards 1 through 8 have available now. It's $1.2 million in 2013, $1.6 million in 2014, and the same number going forward into the foreseeable future, and the opportunity to allocate those funds for capital projects throughout the wards. And we went through a process where we had 20 folks in Ward 1 sit down and develop a participatory process to identify capital projects, to have citizens in Ward 1 identify capital projects, and then to put it out for people to vote on. We had about 400 to 500 people involved in the voting on that this year, and I think some really good results in terms of the projects that they chose for Ward 1. And we'll start implementing those very shortly in 2013. So I think that was, for me, was a really enlightening experience, asking folks to come around and actually design a process, not to say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hold a public information center. We're going to hold open houses. What should we be doing? Designing a process right from scratch on how we're going to get people's feedback on capital projects from Ward 1. I think thinking about that and adapting that kind of thinking to transportation planning, I think over time in Hamilton, we've evolved to sort of an expert approach to consultation and to doing planning. And in my experience, and particularly in the transportation field, that's involved hiring professional consultants and guided by city staff with citizen input. And I've put it in that order because that tends to be the level of power or the level of influence. In politics, you're always thinking about power, who's controlling things, who's deciding on how things are going to be presented. and what sort of feedback's going to come back, and then ultimately what ends up in a plan. And I think that plan essentially favors the status quo. And in our context tonight, it favors cars and vehicles in the transportation plan. I'm suggesting citizen task force to guide us on Queen and Cannon in particular, using those two examples to start with, which would be set up entirely differently. It would be very similar to the public participatory budgeting process we just went through in Ward 1 and Ward 2 is working on as well, where the information is provided to the citizens, and we're empowered as citizens to gather our own data. Working with city staff, and you've already heard tonight, we've got a lot of talented city staff to draw from in terms of knowledge and experience from elsewhere. But to me, that's a plan that inherently favors change versus the status quo. And I think a lot of people are here tonight seeking change. And in this case, that would mean more of a focus, for example, on pedestrians and how do pedestrians move across and around Queen Street, across and around Cannon, in the Kirkendall, Durand neighborhoods, and then Beasley and other neighborhoods as well. So I think I've got down there, knowledge is power, and that's one of those phrases you see quite a bit. But if we, in my view, if we understand what's going on the street, we've got the traffic numbers, we've got some funding maybe to conduct some of our own research as a task force group, and we're pushing the process. We're running the process ourselves, along with some input from others, but we're not talking about the expert approach. We're talking about building a knowledge base within that task force, within that neighborhood, to we actually understand the process just as well as any expert who can come from any part of Canada or anywhere else to help us here in Hamilton. And that's the frustrating part as well. Often the consultants, in my experience, take what they've done in Toronto or Kingston or Ottawa or somewhere else, and they simply just transport it here to Hamilton and put a different spin on it, and we get somebody else's ideas. I think we need our own ideas from our own neighborhoods and building from the streets on up. And of course, the difference as well, the passion, the local knowledge that we all have as people who walk those streets every day is critical. And I think critical for council as well, the credibility that we're going to build with our study, the way we're going to understand it and explain it to council. I think we're going to have a lot more power than the traditional approach. So these are just some ideas on how this might unfold, the citizen task force for the two streets at this point in time that we're talking about. And this is just some initial thoughts. As we did with the participatory budgeting process, we want to charge that task force with developing their own process. You're going to want to think about how you want to do this on Queen Street, which may be very different than what's going on Cannon. Also, you would hope the two would be talking back and forth. But reviewing the existing data, walking the street, noting the challenges that you see by walking up and down the street, the number of driveways that are going at funny angles. If we went two-way instead of one-way, we'd have to change that. The number of streets that are coming on to the process. In the case of Queen, probably Queen South being different than Queen North. Some of the issues, there's a truck route down Queen North end that you want to know about. Noting the information gaps and obtaining the new data that we need. And I know that we've got a bit of funding now with this area rating process we can actually put into those studies. And there's a new company at McMaster Innovation Park that's doing some interesting air photo work, which is sort of live vehicle analysis, watching the vehicles travel from place to place and understanding where people want to go and why they're going down Queen, why they're turning on Aberdeen. If they're heading to the 403, why don't they just carry right on down Queen in a two-way system, make a left on King? Those are the kind of things that we can understand with some of the data that we can obtain. And then reporting back to our fellow citizens beyond the task force itself, getting feedback, offering thoughts, and then ultimately making recommendations to City Council. All of this interacting with the formal environmental assessment process that the city has to be part of that was touched on earlier. Steve, I think, touched on it. So to me, I'll just wrap up, Councillor Farr, by saying there's a lot more power to doing this work ourselves. I think there's incredible amounts of knowledge in this room alone tonight. Lots more knowledge out in the streets, whether it's knowledge that we've learned from reading or going to school. Probably more importantly, by walking across that street for the last 10 years, or in some cases, the last 30, 40 years, when we ask our seniors what they think about some of these areas. So I think that's where the power lies, and we need change. That's why I'm here, and I think what we want to shoot for, a couple of years from now, when people are making that list that Ryan made about all the different studies that occurred, they're going to say something different. Something different happened. It started that night in council chambers. We set up the task forces, and within a year, we had a movement to complete streets or two-way streets. And that's the timeline that I'm looking at. I know council was a little bit nervous about how fast we were moving, Councillor Farr, with that motion that we put forward. But they did ultimately provide us with the opportunity to move ahead, and this is where we are tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mover of the motion, Ward 1's Brian McHattie. We're going to take a quick break. A reminder, you'll have an opportunity to fill out some sheets. If you want to be part of this task force or study group, feel free to fill out the information. Let us know how to get in contact with you, and you'll have an opportunity on these sheets to also isolate on whether or not you want to be part of the Queen study group, the Cannon study group, or even both. So we look forward to getting you involved, and as Brian said in his closing comments, it could very well be. In fact, I'm an optimist. I think it does all start here tonight. So again, thank you all of you for coming and for being patient. You're next. It's the best part of the show. There's no doubt about it. You'll have an opportunity to line up over to the right of our chambers and come up to the podium and say a few words. We'll take questions, comments, and hear your concerns. If I could just now, just before our very brief intermission, to get you a chance to get those forms, get a show of hands to see who might be participating on the microphone tonight, who might say a few words tonight and ask questions tonight. Nick, I know you, and okay, probably 10, 15. Okay, so we'll have plenty of time. Thank you very much when we get up to the microphone and still get out of here at a decent hour. So again, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for viewing on Cable 14. Happy holidays, everybody. You're watching a public meeting. The focus is two-way or complete streets here at Council Chambers, and thank you as well to Hammond and Joey Coleman for live streaming tonight's very important debate at Council Chambers. Quick break, 10 minutes. We'll be back at it. Thanks, everybody. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Welcome back. Welcome back to our Cable 14 viewers and to our viewers on Hammond as well in the live stream. And thank you to the many members of the media, by the way, who are here this evening. I see the Spec and CBC Hamilton and others. It's much appreciated. Of course, a big part of this in the early going is getting the word out. I should mention as well that the forms are on the table, as indicated, right by the main entrance coming out of or into the council chambers. If you didn't have an opportunity during intermission to fill it out, but you do want to get involved, we encourage you to state your name, your phone number, place your email there, and how we can contact you, your organization, if that's applicable to you, and what ward you live in, and then you'll check, please keep me informed. You'll check, I would like to participate in the Queen Street Task Force, or I would like to participate in the Cannon Street Task Force, and then if you have any suggestions, which will encourage the community to participate in this discussion. We'll look for those too. So they are available right there at the entrance of council chambers. All right, let's get going with the public portion of this public meeting. If you'd like, just come on up to the microphone. Please state your name, the ward you're living in, and maybe the street you're living on. And whatever comments, questions for our panel of experts that you may have, feel free to deliver them at this time. So who's up first to the podium? Please, again, introduce yourself, which ward you live in, street you live on, and what it is you'd like to say. You want to speak right into the microphone, everybody.
Hello. My name is Sean. I live in Ward 2, and I also work in Ward 2. I have a bicycle shop on John Street. And I just have two things I wanted to talk about. The first is a comment in response to Steve's question about citizen engagement, and then I have a question as well. So regarding the question about how to engage the citizens, I think that we already have the feedback we need. I don't really know what more you need from us. Most of the neighborhood associations, I think, are backing the concept of two-way street conversions and probably have for quite some time. Residents, those who live in the neighborhoods affected by the one-way streets, are generally in favor of two-way conversions. They've made their voices heard. I've heard them. I'm sure that most people at the city have heard them if they've been listening. Business owners, we've already seen the slides, starting in the 50s, have been making their voices heard. I fear that this whole task force thing is starting another 10-year process. We've heard it. You know what we want. So what are we waiting for? Just a quick question. How many people here feel like they knew most of what was presented about complete streets and the benefits? So almost everybody. No disrespect to the presenters. We appreciate the time and it's important information, but we all know it. Everybody knows it. This is real, like, kindergarten stuff that we're talking about here that everybody already knows. The experts have told us for decades, the citizens have spoken, so maybe it's time to stop worrying about the input. We've got it. The second thing I wanted to address was just a quick question, and this kind of relates to one of Ryan's slides. He went through it very quickly, and I'm not personally familiar with the actual numbers and dates, but there is a list already of streets that have been identified for two-way conversion. I think the dates are around 2007 or 2008. Ryan, I don't know if those were the targets for when they should have been completed by from an earlier study or if that's when they were put on the list. I don't really know. But they're on the list already. Let's just do it. What are we waiting for? What, like, really? Is it money? Is it because some councillors got phone calls from someone who lives on the mountain and is in a hurry? What exactly are we waiting for? That's my question to everybody who is involved in the city. Like, why haven't we done it yet? What's just one reason, the top reason of why we haven't done it yet? That's my question. Any of you can answer, maybe.
Thank you. Does somebody want to offer an answer? I can tell you that it is admirable and certainly no surprise that most of the people in this room are anxious, and that includes many of us on the panel, that this didn't occur yesterday, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about it now, I don't think. And I'm not certain that anybody has assembled in this capacity with these numbers in council chambers before. And if there's one thing I gathered from the first speaker of many tonight, it's that certainly there's knowledge, and if anything, there's momentum. And there's a sense of urgency in, obviously, the comments we just heard and the support we heard from the gallery following the comments. So that's important. I'm probably correct in assuming, too, that there are many people that are going to view this on Cable 14, perhaps tonight on the live stream as well, that aren't as knowledgeable, and those are the people we are seriously trying to recruit here this evening. There are strength in numbers, and ultimately this will lead in fairly short order, not 10 years, not 5, not 3, but in 1 year, a very important presentation to council. One of the things, too, we can recognize is some work is in progress. You heard Councillor Morelli mention a number of streets in Ward 3, certainly a public meeting recently in Ward 2 with respect to Park, and there are other things that possibly we can implement in short order, and we are currently with the City of Hamilton in the budgetary process for 2013, and there's monies available as well that we didn't have before with respect to the area rating funds. But those comments were important and much appreciated, so thank you to our first speaker. Tanya, you're up next to the microphone. Introduce yourself, where you live, and whatever comments or questions you might have.
Okay. Okay. I'm Tanya Ritchie. I live in Ward 3 for about the last 12 years, and I am the co-owner and co-manager of Hamilton Guest House, which is also on Cannon Street. And perhaps most importantly, I walk my daughter to school at Dr. Davey Elementary School 5 days a week along Cannon Street, and it's a nightmare. I'm sure everybody who's driven it or walked it, more to the point, knows that. And I agree 100% with what Sean has to say. I'd like to add, touching on what Councillor McHattie had to say about truck routes, is what I see as, besides commuters from other places in the city and outside the city who want to use downtown Hamilton as a thoroughfare. It's also a truck route. I know Cannon Street is specifically a numbered truck route, I think, and I would just like to point out that with a little bit of extra time, trucks could take Burlington Street East out to the highway. They could take the Red Hill. They could take the Link. They don't need to use downtown as a thoroughfare. It might be more convenient, and that's what Mr. McGreal said as well. It's made more convenient for them to do it. I think perhaps the best way to reach out to people who are not residents and do not work or play downtown but just use it as a thoroughfare, the best thing we could do is simply educate them to the fact that they don't have to and that there are other options available to them. They can go around. It's not going to take them a heck of a lot longer.
Key point, truck routes. Majority of the industry is Wellington and east of Wellington, and certainly Burlington Street with the Burlington Street overpass. Great point. I had a feeling it was going to be mentioned tonight. Come on up, whoever's next. You, sir. We'll switch sides here. Your name and where you're from and whatever comment or questions you have.
Good evening. My name is George Sabara, and I live in Ward 1. I'm afraid I'm going against the flow here. I'm not in favor of two-way streets. I avoid James Street like the plague. Main reason is you keep saying that the businesses want the two-way streets. Well, I've talked to the businesses, the Wild Orchid, Ventura's, Miller's, Morgenstein, and the hardware store, and their business has declined, not improved. I don't know where you got your information from. And the import, one of the stores even closed, the import store that used to be on the north side of the armories. They closed because the flow of traffic wasn't there anymore because of the two-way streets. And every time I go on James Street, if I happen to go that way, I have no choice, it takes me forever to get up that street. Now, is that going to encourage me to go into one of those stores? No. I haven't gone to Miller's now in 3 years now. I go to the one on the mountain now because it's so busy down there. You can't find parking anymore. And like I said, I don't know where you got that information that the people are very happy what they got. Well, I did my own survey, and sir, this is what I found. Queen Street, making that two-way. Now, you show that picture of Queen Street with no traffic. Was that for a split second? Because I go up Queen Street all the time, and it's busy like hell. It's so busy on Queen Street. And if you were to put that to two-way, what about the people coming off the highway? How long is it going to take them to get up to Queen Street access? What about the people that live in the area? Okay, fine.
If you want to speak, you can come on down to the podium, okay? Good, carry on, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I understand what you're saying about that. But, I mean, you're going to always have cars. You're going to have it. If you're going to turn Queen Street, it's just going to be chaos. Now, Durand Street, you reduce that lane going out to York Street by one lane. What's happening there now? I don't know if you've been there lately, but the lineup is incredible. And you want to talk about environment? Now, keeping those cars there, just constantly waiting for a light to turn green, is that good? No. When you got the traffic going through there a lot quicker, you get less pollution that way. Because just last week when I was there on Durand there, I started up at the liquor store. It took me forever to get down that street. I say, okay, you say you got all these surveys and everything that you're doing. Talk to the people. See what they want. If the majority of the people say they want the 2 lanes, fine then. Okay, go that way. But you say we got this survey done, we got this survey done, this happened in Ottawa. This is Hamilton. See what the people of Hamilton want. If they wanted to, well, fine. Then we go with the flow, and that's great. I'm sorry. I'm very nervous right now because I'm not used to talking to people out in public like this. And Cannon Street, okay, I understand that lady said that it's difficult getting across Cannon Street when you have children. Yes, you're right. It is difficult. But I would say put more traffic lights then, if that's the case. And I mean, I obey the rules of the road. I never speed down any of the streets. And if there's more traffic lights, people can cross those traffic lights without worrying about getting hit, or is they saying they're going to get hit by a car. But I'm afraid I'm going against the flow here tonight. I've been in this city a long, long time, and I could just see what's happening. And I think going with a two-way street is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir? Sir,
actually,
you're going to get a response from Ryan. You had mentioned some of the studies, and so he wants to respond.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank you for coming up here and speaking. I know it can be intimidating, and I really appreciate you coming and sharing. In terms of, I just wanted to, you asked me a few questions, and I wanted to just give you some responses. The downtown business improvement area it's a business association that accommodates all the businesses along James North and along Main, and they surveyed all of their members after the streets were converted, and the large majority of businesses said that business had improved. So that's where that came from. And if you look at James North, back in 2002, the councillor at the time actually was at a public meeting, and he was asked, you know, how come business on James North is so bad? Like, what can we do to bring the businesses back? And he said, forget about it. Business is never coming back to James North. That was 10 years ago. That street, and I've lived in and around downtown for about 20 years now, probably not as long as you have, but I've been up and down James, I've been up and down Queen, I've been up and down Dundurn and Locke, and James North is unquestionably a much more economically vital place now than it was 10 years ago. There's a huge number of new businesses opened. There have investors who've bought properties, renovated them. Upstairs have condos and apartments now. Storefronts are almost all filled. James North is unquestionably in much better shape than it was 10 years ago. There may be a few businesses where their business is going up and down, but overall, I don't think there's any question that James is in much better shape. I walk, I cycle, and I drive. I do all three. I own a car. I'm not anti-car. I just think we need a much better balance. You know, as a pedestrian, I much prefer walking on James North now than I did 10 years ago. Same as a cyclist. And as a driver, to be perfectly honest, I don't mind driving on James. I'm not in a rush. I actually have time to slow down and see the street signs, which you aren't able to do when you're going by at 50 kilometers an hour. And in terms of safety for pedestrians, there's no question the street is much safer now than it used to be. And you see a lot more people walking. You see small, you know, grocery stores with displays out front and people shopping there. 10 years ago, that was mostly absent.
Okay, you're saying that right. Okay, you say that it's improving and everything. Well, I've been around a long time too. And okay, maybe the traffic flow wasn't as great back then, but that area, I remember a time when there was a whole bunch of businesses on James Street, and it was flourishing down there. There were all kinds of grocery stores, and there were a ton of people. A lot of those businesses are gone now. And okay, you got the arts down there, which is fantastic. I enjoy that very, very much. But you got to look at the overall picture. You're saying that these new places are doing very, very well. Well, you know, you got to look at the overall picture. So what about the businesses that have lost a lot of people? I mean, how long are they going to be there? And these new places that are there, you know, okay, maybe they're doing great right now because the people are, it's new and everything. Will that be the same another 2 or 3 years down the road? I don't know. Like, people like to get up and down a street. They like to park their car, go in. But when it takes them forever to go up a street, like, I love for you to go down, start at Burlington Street and go to King and see how long it takes you. You'd be amazed how slow it is to get up that street. And in the meantime, people are going to stop. Oh, I'm going to go get something to eat now. They're probably so mad. I want to get home.
Okay, we'll let Ryan respond. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you coming in. Ryan?
Thank you. No, again, I mean, I walk on James North regularly. I drive on James North regularly. It's slower, and I say that's a good thing. As a driver, I'm not in a rush to race down the street. And as a pedestrian on the same street, I'm glad that cars are not racing by. I'm wearing a pair of shoes right now that I bought 2 months ago at Miller's on James North. James Street, the one on Upper James is a two-way street. It's not chaos. We can handle two-way streets. They exist almost everywhere on Earth.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
So my name's Justin Jones. I'm actually a new resident of Hamilton. I've lived here for about a year, and moved from Toronto, and I'm absolutely shocked at how much I love the city. So I was one of those people that was like, I don't want to move to Hamilton. No, I'm like, I wouldn't move back if you asked me to. I live in Ward 1. I love it. I live on Oxford Street. I live right by York, right near two schools that have chain link fence, and watch cars go by them at 60 to 70 kilometers an hour instead of having them slow down. We've just put up big, tall fences around our children. This is a question of priorities. It's a matter of prioritizing 30 seconds here, 2 minutes there, versus the quality of life of people that live in the area and exist and work and play. I wouldn't have moved to the place that I live now. I wouldn't love my neighborhood. I wouldn't love James Street North if it was like Main Street, if it was like King Street, if it was like Cannon Street. So I just want to emphasize that. And I want to ask the councillors, how do you get, I mean, it's great to see wards 1, 2, and 3 here. It's great to see the downtown wards, but how do you start to talk to your colleagues, and how do you start to get them to start to change their priorities so that the 23.5 hours a day that their constituents are not racing through our wards on these downtown highways become more of a priority to them than the 2 or 3 minutes that their constituents save by having one-way streets running through our neighborhoods?
If you saw the debate around our motion, you know how challenging that is with our colleagues. But I go back to this idea that we need to develop the task forces with our own recommendations, real people making recommendations, real people living in those neighborhoods. And I think we're going to have a strong influence on our colleagues if we get that kind of thing. I mean, the other thing that one of the fellows is not here tonight, Jason Leach, took all the city traffic data from the mountain. And the traffic volumes up there are way higher than they are in the lower city. So the question for the guys up there is, do you want one-way streets? Because you have much higher volumes than we do. And the answer is obviously no. So I think over time, changing the way they think, I think we've got a good opportunity to do that. I'm feeling that we can definitely influence them.
I'm glad the councillor mentioned the traffic volumes. Very briefly, Councillor McHattie's point number 5, making recommendations to City Council, is how this will all wrap up very soon within the year, and all sorts of discussions during the budgetary process too. And around that, the one councillor that challenged us most, I think, was Stony Creek's Brad Clark, and you watched it on September the, I believe it was the 6th, and then ratified without debate at council on the 12th. But he didn't like the term implementation team. And I remember sitting next to my colleague, Councillor McHattie, and oftentimes, not often, but now and again, he gets very frustrated when he works so hard on something like this, important citywide ramifications with initiatives like this. And he was frustrated at Councillor Clark's wanting to change the wordage, but we realized soon that it would be accepted. So even that day, if you watch that debate early, you could see, uh-oh, this might be going south. We whisper back and forth to each other like, this might be falling off the rails. And we suggested that maybe it's just take what we can. Take implementation team out of there. Councillor Clark, who's a stickler for policy and process, didn't like the idea of putting it in the hands of the public and didn't like the idea of following process. But if you turn it into study group, you'll get wide acceptance. That's initially, that's inevitably what happened. And so here we are tonight with a study group that eventually will be, I think, an implementation team. And when we look at point 5, maybe what we need to do is present as a group, as a task force to council, just like we did with neighborhood development. A very emotional and a very memorable evening for all of our colleagues that evening. It was a special council evening, and it wasn't us, the politicos, yammering on. It was a presentation made by those involved in the neighborhoods, and it was unanimously accepted, and it's still talked about today. So maybe when we look at that final point of the 5 points over the course of this short period of time to move things forward, we don't make recommendations, Brian and I or Bernie or anyone else, but maybe we make the consultation, the folks involved in the process, the people that live, work, and play in wards 1, 2, and 3, and throughout our city that want to be part of this task force, maybe we let them present because it sure worked with the neighborhood development piece. So that's something we might want to look at. Great comments. Thank you very much. Welcome to Hamilton, and congratulations to the Argos on the big victory the other day. literally from Calgary. All right, who's next? Your name and the ward you're from.
John Neary. I live on Mary Street in Beasley neighborhood in Ward 2, between Wilson and Cannon Streets. I'm here partly tonight to represent the Beasley Neighborhood Association. Our 2 co-presidents were not able to attend. I actually have a letter from them for you, Councillor Farr. I won't read the whole thing because it would be tedious, but I'll just read the first paragraph. Dear Councillor Farr, we wish to express our support for the work members of City Council are about to undertake as part of the Complete Streets Study Group. As residents of Beasley, we support the implementation of complete streets in our neighbourhood and in nearby neighbourhoods, including the reversion of Cannon and Queen Streets into complete two-way streets. I'll make a couple quick comments and then I have a question. As I said, I live on Mary Street between Wilson and Cannon. There's been some going back and forth between the phrases complete streets and two-way streets. I think complete streets have to be two-way. A one-way street is at most a half-complete street. Just as an example, my son is about to turn 3. He needs to learn how to ride a bicycle. As long as Mary Street remains one way and dead ends at Cannon, he can't learn to ride a bicycle on my street. That's not a complete street. Still on the topic of Mary Street, we've done a little bit of our own internal polling of stakeholders in our neighborhood. We've talked to pretty much everyone we could think of who has an interest in that street, and everyone who has a business or organization there, from the Hamilton Downtown Mosque to the Knitting Mills, to the Variety Store at Mary and Robert, to the Good Shepherd Center, to the Hamilton Guest House. They all think it's a good idea. And I think that we'll find that with every one of the streets we're talking about. I also want to say that I hope that these East End streets that somehow didn't make it onto the wish list in a lot of the previous plans we've talked about don't get overlooked. That we don't say we're going to do all the West End streets first and then move east. The question I wanted to ask to Councillor Farr, Councillor McHattie, and Councillor Morelli, and I should say that I'm glad that one of the things that's really brought this forward is that for the first time, we have a councillor in Ward 2 who's willing to stand up and say, I think this is what we need to do for our community. We didn't have that 3 years ago. That's why we're all here tonight. And so thank you, Councillor Farr. But, when someone says something like that, they're usually building up to an ask. No, actually not Mary Street. Sure.
Just a second. Fortunately, this is pre-taped.
Yep.
Okay, if it speeds up, we'll have to move so we can hear.
Sure.
Dale from the Ward 1 office says it's okay.
Sure.
If we do need to exit the building, we're going to go right out the back and then keep going towards the parking lot, okay?
Sure.
So what's your question?
Sure. I think it's safe to say that the real decision-making doesn't all happen in these public meetings. It doesn't even happen on the floor of council. A lot of it happens between councillors. And there's a lot of horse trading that goes on different issues that come before council. And I would just ask, are the three of you willing to make this something that is non-negotiable? That when a difficult issue comes before council, or even a project in another ward, beautifying Wilson Street in Ancaster, which is already way nicer than any of these streets, bring a casino downtown, anything that might be controversial. Are you willing to say, we demand support for two-way complete streets in downtown Hamilton in order to back your own cause?
Excuse me? Everybody's going to have to leave.
I'm so sorry. We're going to get to the question
Sure.
in just a second. Fortunately, this is pre-taped.
Yep.
For our viewers on Cable 14, we had a fire alarm go off. You may still hear it just a little bit in the background. We continued the meeting outside, and you'll recall, obviously, just seconds ago, because this has been edited, that John had asked the question, John from Beasley, whether the wards 1, 2, and 3 councillors would challenge our other councillors and really ramp it up and tell them that if they don't support the two-way or complete street initiative, we won't support them on other initiatives. To that, Ward 1's Councillor Brian McHattie responded outside as we continued the meeting during the fire drill here. You said to John, Brian.
to John's point, I don't think we need to do that kind of horse trading, particularly with this council that we've got now. We've got a respectful relationship amongst the various councillors, and we can talk to each other about our priorities. And I think we're going to get more support than we suspect.
Then architect Dave Premy asked the question outside, which was answered in part by Councillor Brian McHattie, and now to be answered by our CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, who's offered to answer the good question with respect to economic development. And why don't we formulate a stronger argument in terms of what two-way streets means for the city as a whole with respect to economic development? And David, take it away. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Farr. And hopefully folks in the audience can hear a little bit. I'll try and speak right into the microphone, but let me know if you can hear or not. I think, I wrote a few notes down earlier in the session, and one point I wrote down here is we need to be very clear on what the burning platform is, or what the need is. So if we think about a quick definition of public policy, it's an action or a course of action taken by decision makers to deal with a problem. So I think, David, you were talking about putting an economic frame around the argument of complete streets. So I think we want to be clear on what problem are we trying to solve, and we do have different perspectives in Hamilton about what the issue is. So being very clear on what we want to call the burning platform or what the need is. So I wrote down other comments. Ryan McGreal talked about challenge ideology with evidence. Steve Malloy talked about providing best options for citizen engagement. And Councillor McHattie said report to fellow citizens with data, mobility, and change options. So I think it is important that we do inform our residents, we involve our residents so that they will invest in coming together on some solutions here. So data is important. And it also struck me as we listed the variety of reports that have been done over the years is, maybe this is a question or a comment, that perhaps staff could go through all those different reports and pull some summaries together so that we can do a bit of a gap analysis on what the information, what information is missing. And last but not least, I do want to say the Chamber of Commerce will be part of the conversation. As Councillor Farr said in his opening remarks, we have yet to take a position on this, but we want to be part of the conversation. There is a letter drafted that's coming to Council. That could be as early as tomorrow. It originated with our Transportation Committee, where we're asking or recommending to City Council that they hire the McMaster Institute for Transportation Logistics to do a study on the impacts of complete streets. So that's coming to you. But we also want to do our part. So the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce has commissioned a study to compare 4 streets. We're going to compare James North to Cannon Street and Locke Street to Main West, and we're going to look at a 30-year period for a change in assessment. So we want to make, and that's back to David's comment earlier about what's the economic argument around change. So we're going to let the data speak to over a continuum of time. And the last comment I do want to make about this issue, going back to the informing our residents, is we have probably a continuum of opinion on this issue. So we have those folks that are informed. I suspect most people in the audience tonight. People over here who are opposed, and there's people in the middle just need more information to make some informed decisions. So I think this is an important conversation tonight and going forward. Okay, so thank you.
David Adames, thank you very much. That's encouraging, very encouraging. Also working with David, Councillor McHattie, and myself on the LRT task force, and we look forward to a meeting later this week. And LRT is a huge part of, I think, what we're talking about tonight as well. Who's up next? Nicholas, come on up here. Nick, from the Durand Neighborhood Association.
So thanks very much. I'd just like to speak to 2 issues. First, during the presentations tonight, two-way conversion and complete streets have been talked about almost synonymously. And in Hamilton, it's kind of funny because two-way conversion is really a compromise option because it's simple, it's relatively inexpensive, it doesn't really decrease traffic capacity very much, and yet it arises a lot of fear and antipathy from residents in the city. And I think part of the issue we need to sort out is why we are proposing two-way conversion. Some people might say, well, why don't we keep one-way streets and make them complete streets? And we have to say, well, you know what that would entail? That would entail taking 1 or 2 lanes of traffic away, drastically reducing the capacity. So that's, I think, a Hamilton-specific issue. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the process. And I think I'm very impressed with Brian's sketch of how the task force could work, because there's been a lot of citizen engagement over the years, and I've done my little bit through the DNA and as a regular resident, but there's often been a disconnect between policy voted by council. For example, we support the pedestrian charter. We want to, I think, double transit use. Studies which get citizen comment, and then the final council decisions. And often the council decisions go in counter to the policy, counter to the studies. And I think putting this together, so the study, the policy, and the council decision are happening in the same process is a good idea. But what I'm concerned about is, as we saw from the gentleman who was obviously vehemently opposed to two-way conversion, how do we ensure that this process is credible to the councillors outside of wards 1 to 3? And I was thinking, do we ask them to nominate members? Are we actively soliciting members from, wards 10, from wards 8, 9? How do we make sure that when this task force comes with its recommendation, we don't get the same response that, well, you guys in the lower city like it, but I was talking to my friend in Ward 8, and he told me he'll never go downtown again, and it's bad for my residents, so I can't support it. So I think before entering this process, we need to make sure that whatever process we decide on is credible for the rest of council. So that's my main question.
Nicholas. Speak right in the microphone. You don't have to shout. The audio is actually pretty good, but it's just the people who are live in the chamber that might be a little bit annoyed right now, but you'll be fine.
Okay, my name is Gord Jackson, and I'm a citizen. I live on Hunter Street in Ward 2, and I also do a bit of broadcasting on CFMU. Couple of things. First of all, I want to associate myself with the comments we just heard. I think inclusivity is a very important part of the future consultations, and I would highly recommend following the diagram that was just laid out. I'm a senior myself, born and raised here in Hamilton, who remembers both one-way streets and the imposition of two-way streets. Trust me, two-way is much better. There was a comment earlier from the gentleman who was, as he mentioned, going against the flow, and he was talking about businesses failing in the downtown. And my response to that is very simply going back into the 50s on James Street, and in those days he was talking about when it was so thriving, there were no shopping malls up the hill to go to. There was no so-called free parking. That had a great impact, this whole move out of the core, which is now starting in some places more than others to be reversed. Another thing I would mention, and this is something I think a lot of seniors like myself can relate to, but particularly those who are not fortunate like me. I'm very fortunate. I can get around okay. I don't have any problems with it. But there are a lot of seniors right in the downtown here, and I'm thinking particularly on Main Street over here, who live here and are quite intimidated by the kind of Daytona 500 that we have on Main Street, and some of them who maybe go out in walkers or are on crutches or whatever, that traffic can be very, very intimidating. Also, I think something else that might possibly be kept in mind, and something we've been living with in the lower city for a long time, and that is, again, King Street, for example, and Main Street too, the traffic rushing by the way it is also going by nursing homes, and that traffic is being heard in those nursing homes. And again, if any of those residents do happen to be able to venture out, if only to get into a car with loved ones, it is very, very intimidating indeed. I would like to ask when we are going to get on with Bold and Hunter and a few others for conversion. I really think it is about time we started getting on with those streets instead of just the endless chit-chat about it. Finally, I want to make mention that, anyway, to me, with more people moving into the core, a new grocery store going into Jackson Square, and other things happening, hotels going up, condos going up, and the like, I think we need to get ready for more people living downtown and creating a more pedestrian, bike, and auto, getting ready for more pedestrian, bike, and auto traffic. And that means not maintaining, again, our speedways that we've got, because they're only going to wreak havoc even more. You have to calm traffic if you are going to have people living here. I look at Toronto, and Toronto's downtown is thriving, and one of the reasons may very well be nobody had the bright idea of converting Yonge Street into a one-way street. They didn't have the bright idea of doing that with University Avenue either, or with Spadina, or with Bathurst, or with Dufferin. They are all two-way streets, and the two-way streets for very, very good reason. And I think, again, we need to get back to the core of simply recognizing that people are going to be living down here, and their quality of life matters every bit as much as anybody else's quality of life in the city. Thank you very much.
All right, we have one more speaker. Dave's here representing the NEN. He's also from the Jamesville Community Neighborhood Association.
Planning team.
He chairs that planning team. And I've been looking forward to his comments tonight. So, Dave, you're our final speaker. Remember, if you have any questions, too, you can direct them to our panel who are sticking it out, as well as the majority of the folks that started out with us, despite the notice of fire. Thank you.
Actually, I do have a question for Peter and an answer for you. We're actually releasing our neighborhood plan December 7th.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Dave. Thank you. Right into the microphone.
I actually have a question for Peter and an answer for you about engaging the public. We're actually releasing our plan at a fun fair December 7th out to the public of the Jamesville Tavern, December 7th. Now, one of our actions that we do want to strive to succeed with is the complete streets. Okay, if you guys would like to get like a presentation, have a little booth to engage the public, you're more than welcome to. And my actual question is for Peter. Earlier when you were talking, you were mentioning about balance in the neighborhoods with traffic flows. Now, with balance, there comes parity with one-way streets. Okay, usually they're paired one northbound, one southbound. Like, we have James and McNabb, which are paired together. Why would the city planners choose to do one street without the other, right? Same with Wilson and Cannon, they're paired. Why do something halfway without having provisions for future the other way? Like, shouldn't that have already been discussed and set out prior?
I think that will come in, I agree, and I think that looking at it in isolation might be a problem for now, but I think when we look at the TMP, and this is a question for Steve as well, we're going to look at the whole system as a network. So if you're looking at Queen, you might also look at Bay, because they're a pair.
Okay.
So I think that would come up during the master planning process, now that the ideas about Queen being converted are on the table.
I thought Queen and Hess were paired.
It's Queen and Bay. But I mean, either way, I think through the TMP process, that will come to light. Okay. Understanding that as a whole system. And if you're going to make one change in the system, what happens to the rest of it? So I think that kind of analysis has to go on at the transportation master planning level.
Okay. All right, thank you. And that presentation...
Let Steve Malloy add to that.
So just to clarify, Queen and Bay were designed originally to carry higher traffic flows, and that's why they were considered the pair. Okay. The other pair would be Hess and Caroline, so those were the pair to be considered. So just to clarify that point.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, I'd like to invite you to our fun fair. It's December 7th at Sir Johnny MacDonald in the gym. You're more than welcome if you want to bring a few boards for a presentation, engage, get support for the public. Go nuts.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, especially considering the last half hour and the incessant ringing in our ears. It's very important. Public engagement, big start tonight to a process that we hope accomplishes great things in short order and gets a majority of support once presented to our councillor colleagues. So on behalf of Councillor Morelli, Councillor McHattie, and myself, Councillor Farr, and our organizing team that featured Keenan and Ryan and others who were very helpful in setting this meeting up, and particularly Dale Brown from the Ward 1 office. Thanks again for attending. Hope you get a chance to view this and encourage others to view it on Cable 14, obviously on Cable 14 and their YouTube page as well. And thank you to Joey Coleman as well for the live stream. This will be available perpetually now on Ham On. So thank you very much, Joe. It's great to have you in the chambers. Thank you, everybody.